Good evening, everybody. My name is Ricardo. Nice to meet you all. Nice to see you all. So if anybody doesn't speak English, I'll try to give some keywords in Portuguese. But lecture tonight, as Joanna says in English, is about our Father, or most commonly known as the Lord's Prayer. So basically, just giving some contextualization. In this second semester of 2018, here on the public talks, we have been studying the moral laws. They are found in which part of the Spirit's book? 3, or the 3rd book. In the month of October, we are studying Law of Adoration, Law of Conservation. So for tonight, Law of Adoration with the Lord's Prayer. And basically, just to give some contextualization, we're going to just kind of recap what Spiritism is telling us about adoration, what Spiritism tells us about prayer, and finally, we're going to delve into the Lord's Prayer in myself. So the ultimate goal for us for tonight is to be able to connect to a specific part inside of us, in our conscious, in our hearts, which is the law of adoration. So to draw ourselves closer to God. So in any ways, by listening, by reflecting, by meditating, let us try to connect to what is right inside of us, the law of adoration. So basically, the chapter 2 of the book 3, Allan Kardec asked questions to the spirits. This is, for those who doesn't know, this is the Spirit's book, or Livro dos Espíritos. It's a book of questions and answers, and Allan Kardec coordinated this work. He's asking, directing the questions, and combining, putting together, using the answers from evolved spirits, for benevolent spirits. And so he asked, what is adoration? And the spirits reply in a very simple few words. So let's read. In what does adoration consist? And the answer is, in the elevation of the thoughts towards God. Through adoration, the soul draws nearer to Him. So, elevating the thought. So us, spirits, incarnated or discarnated, we are the intelligent beings of the universe. So what does intelligent being does? We think. And think is the first action before we do the other actions, like talking and moving and carrying boxes and playing on the phone, talking to someone. We think, and that's the creation that we do. Before any creation that we do in our minds first. And so basically, adoration is the specific thought that is elevating us towards God, to getting closer to God. Okay, seems like a simple answer. How to do that may not sound so simple, and we perhaps may discover what we already know, and know that we already can do that. So just a little contextualization about that too is in the 3rd book of the Spirit's book is about the divine law, the moral law. Because the physical laws, we have the science to study. And Spirit is led by Allan Kardec, studying the different laws that govern the life of the spirits. So moral laws are governing what is right and wrong, what are the right doings or wrongdoings for us. And in the previous chapter, the chapter 1, Allan Kardec is asking questions about good and evil, about the moral law. And one of the questions, I believe, is 621, which is, where is written the divine law? Does anybody remember the answer? We talk a lot about this. In our conscience. So all of us, incarnated, discarnated, whether we believe it or not, according to the spirits, we carry the divine law in our conscience. And so we may forget because we get distracted by the material life, or because we have our pride, or because we have some mix of misconceptions of life, but it's there. And even if you don't access it, it's there in latent form, like in dormant form. So basically, we have all of that inside of us, the adoration law, which is an internal drive to get closer to God. And the most common, I think, perhaps I may be wrong, but one of the most common ways that we do to get closer to God is what? Prayer, right? Oração. So when we want to get closer to God, we pray. And we may do something else. But internally, if that's true and sincere, that's a prayer too. So in the same chapter, Allan Kardec goes and asks questions about prayer. And if anybody wants to study, that's an amazing chapter. And I would also recommend in the Gospel According to Spiritism, Angelis segundo Spiritismo. In the last chapter, there is a collection of prayers. And Allan Kardec is explaining and giving us some guidance. And the previous chapters too talk about that. Next week, we're going to have days and talk about ask and shall be given in Portuguese. It's one of the chapters, one of the lessons in the Gospel According to Spiritism. So now, just again, another contextualization, the second part, is about prayer. So basically, somebody wants to say in a few words, what is the recommendation of the spirits in terms of prayer in the Spiritist doctrine?
From our heart?
From our heart. When we look at Spiritist doctrine in the Spirit's book, in the Gospel According to Spiritism, everywhere it's always saying what matters is intention. Oh, should man do this? Should man do that? And it says, is it good? Is it bad? What matters is the intention. So the recommendation for us to connect to God, or to talk to God, or to listen to God, it's very important for us to have a sincere intention to connect to Him. And even if we're not pure yet, but we practice the exercise of purifying ourselves in the moment that we are trying to connect to God. Does it make sense? So we can pray anytime. We should pray all the time when we wake up, before we do something, when we're brushing our teeth, when we're eating, after we're eating, before starting a project, once we finish a project or a task. We can pray alone, like in the reading that Jesus was going to pray alone, or as a group. And other things, other guidelines that Allan Kardec is giving us is that when we pray, it's important to the prayer to be simple and clear. So that's a contrast to sometimes we think the most important prayers are those who are very beautiful and sophisticated. But if we are making a sophisticated prayer, but we don't have the sincere feeling, that's not the prayer who will help us to connect to God. Does it make sense? It could be sophisticated, but with the sincere feeling, then it helps us connect to God. And so, like if I would be speaking here in English and a person doesn't understand any English, it will be very hard to take the most important benefit of the study of the night. So, because it's another language, so I'm not really thinking. I might be trying to feel good by being here, or thinking about something else and trying to feel good. But that's the same thing for the prayer. So it's important for us, when we are practicing the exercise of connecting to God, to have the sincere thought and practice virtues during our prayer too, and to be clear and understand what we are saying. So if we are saying a prayer that somebody taught us, like the Lord's Prayer, not just saying by saying, like we memorize and we just say with the mouth, but say it with the heart, feeling and reflecting upon it. So Allan Kardec, in the last chapter of the Gospel According to Spiritism, as the collection of prayers, and the Spirits gave him a recommendation for him to put in the beginning of the chapter the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, and for him to develop that, to kind of the practice and exercise for all of us to not just to look at the words and to listen to the words, but first to think and apply that meaning to our life. So that's what we're going to spend most of our time. We're going to be looking at the words and discussing the words of the Lord's Prayer, and taking some of the meanings that they have for us. It's a very simple prayer, but it has a very deep meaning. And anything that Jesus, which was a perfect spirit already when he incarnated on our planet, everything he taught us, we can see as like layers, like an onion or a cake. It's like the deeper we go, the more we learn. And so even simple words, because simple words can achieve simple minds, like the spirits who are a little bit more ignorant. But as we evolve, we can go back to the words and learn more and apply our knowledge. So Allan Kardec developed the Lord's Prayer. I recommend everybody read this if you haven't done so, or do it again. So we're going to bring some of his analysis and other combination of other parts of Spiritism. And we're going to do that for the rest of the night. So the first exercise we are forced to do as a group, it's okay to make mistakes, but we're going to invite us all to repeat the Lord's Prayer. If you only know in Portuguese, it's okay. You can repeat or you can stay quiet, whatever you prefer. But if you remember when Jesus said, when two more people are reunited in my name, I'll be there. So let us practice that Jesus is here right now. And how can it be possible? How can it be here and be in so many places at the same time? And actually, Allan Kardec asked this type of question. The Spirit says, like the sun radiates everywhere. And we can see the sun if we are in New York, if we're here in San Francisco Bay Area, in Brazil, depending on the time zone, not the same time. But Jesus' love we can compare to the sun, who is radiating all the time, non-stop, no matter what, no matter to whom. So let us practice that Jesus is here and say together. So, our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive our trespasses as we forget those who trespass against us. Forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation and deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. So, when I was studying to learn how to say that in English, I learned in Portuguese, and I remember from the moment that I learned, there were many situations in my life that I had to say publicly as a group. And like when some family member passed away and we were making prayer for the person, or other life situations. And I noticed that even in Brazil, many people say that prayer with different words. And when I was trying to learn how do we say in English, I downloaded a Bible. I had the Apple, the Bible app, which needs to be upgraded. And there's like dozens of Bible versions in English. Like I think I used the King James version, but there are a lot of different versions. And then when you go in the Bible, compare the versions, they have different words. Sometimes the whole sentence is not there. This prayer is found in the Gospel of Luke and Matthew. So I think the one I'm using for tonight is closer to the Gospel of Matthew. So that we're not going to have much slides. We're going to just go over the words. Starting with Our Father, which art in heaven. I feel like the main word of this sentence would be Father. And for those who were here at Marisa's lecture, like in August, she talked about how Jesus came with his mission. And if we connect to the previous chapter that I said of the moral laws, Allan Kardec asked the Spirit, so what was the most perfect example and role model and teacher of the divine laws, which is already in our conscience, but we may have forgotten or may have confused? And they said it was Jesus. And Allan Kardec complements the question, saying that Jesus was the most perfect spirit ever incarnated on our planet. And later on, when we get other books, like books from Chico Xavier, it's a Brazilian well-known medium through the spirits of Emmanuel, for example, he says that Jesus was assigned to take care of our planet in its moment of creation. So he was already a perfect spirit, like we will be one day. And so Jesus came with the mission to teach us to conquer the kingdom of heaven in our hearts. And he chose, like back to Marisa's lecture, he chose to come with a specific people, which were which people Jesus came? The Jewish people. And why? Allan Kardec comments on the first chapter of the Gospel according to Spiritism, that I didn't come to destroy the law, because they were the only people who believed in a single God. So imagine for us trying to connect to God, but if God wasn't a single entity, there would be some conflict. Well, that God says this thing, and the other one says something else. So which one should I follow? So we would be in conflict. And in the past, when we were perhaps followers of multiple gods, we were in the infancy of our spiritual existence. But the more we acquire knowledge and reason, then it starts to make more sense that there cannot be two gods. There could be perhaps infinite numbers of superior spirits, but God only one. He's the ultimate creator, and that helps us to connect to the attribute of God to be one, because we are all one. We are not divisible. We may be on this life as Katie, as Adriana, or in the past lives as somebody else, maybe the same name, maybe a different name. Next life might have a different name, probably going to have a different social security number. If I incarnate in the US, I may be Japanese. But I'm still only one. I'm a single spirit who have a very unique story. And now Jesus, when he came to tell us, one of the very important breakthroughs of his mission was to say that God is our Father. And give the contextualization back to the time that Jesus came. The Jewish were already believers of God being a tyrant, a being, anthropomorphic being, like a man, that punishes those who don't follow the law. Allan Kardec separates the Moses teachings, the Jewish follow many prophets or mediums in our words, being Moses the main one. And by his actions, by the actions we can recognize, by the fruit we can recognize the tree. So by his actions we can recognize he was not a perfect spirit yet, but he was more evolved than the ones at his time. And he needed to have, to create this image of a strong father, a strong God, and one who punishes those who doesn't follow the law. Because the Jewish people were still very cruel. They were like rude people, and they were already addicted to many vices that they got from coexisting with the Egyptians. So Moses had to make it harsh for help them to retrain, or maybe us then, to retrain our behaviors by fearing God. And then Jesus came to show a different perspective, that we should not fear God, we should love God. And when we are driven by love, when we choose our free will, with love, loving God, connecting to God, then we are making choices because we want to, and not because we fear the punishment. Does it make sense? So then, our Father which art in heaven. So Father, let us think like this. Like when you look at these words, what is the position? What is the exercise I can do? What is the position that I can put myself into when I'm saying these words? So I would say when I talk to God and I say Father, I'm putting myself in the position of a child of the creator of the universe. So I'm a child of the power, the supreme power of the universe. I'm a child of the one who loves in a way that we cannot even imagine. We cannot really understand God fully with the level of development that we have, as the Spirit says, but we can understand something and we can practice that exercise. And then the other word together with Father, which I think would be very important too in the quintessential of the prayer, which was the other word. Our Father. So in the same time that when I'm trying to practice the adoration law to connect to God by recognizing I'm a child of God, of the creator of the universe, I also put together the feeling of brotherhood, of fraternity, fraternidade. Because when I say our Father, I am recognizing that all of the others, people, animal, spirits, plants, everything that God created can be seen as our brothers and sisters, especially people. And so Jesus is teaching us that when we are looking to connect to God, it is important to recognize and to develop this virtue of fraternity, of brotherhood. So the prayer goes, Our Father which art in heaven. So question, have anybody here never heard of the Spiritist view on heaven and hell? Never heard, have no idea. You can raise your hand like this, quickly. You can blink to me so nobody sees. Don't look at the others, Julie. So I'm going to just give a little flavor of the answer and recommend to study. There is a book, a whole book on that, Heaven and Hell, by Allan Kardec. Is one of the basic books of Spiritism. And he talks also in the fourth part of the Spirit's book. Basically, if a father here on earth, if a father would, a sane father, son, that in good reasoning, that loves his children, would not give him punishment forever. Like you are not going to have lunch never anymore because of what you did. A sane father will never do that. So how can God, the ultimate father, do that? So the Spiritist view on heaven and hell is that, first, in terms of hell, there is no situation that we will, by our mistakes, will be punished forever in a place for suffering. So the suffering happens, but it's conditioned to us to do what? To repent, and then to seek to repair and to change. So if I made a mistake because I didn't have developed a virtue, which is my mission to develop the virtue, I didn't do that, then I recognize and then I work to develop the virtue because I'm not going to make the mistake again once I develop the virtue. And I may still make mistakes until I get there, but working on recognizing that and trying to repair because we are a family. So when we make mistakes, we are affecting others. So it's nothing more than fair than try to repair and try to help the community we are surrounded by. So that's we all the spirits in the universe will progress to God. We may choose because we have free will to stay stationary, but we will eventually have opportunity to regret and to continue evolving because the law is of progress and the law is of work. So Spiritism helps us to reveal that there is no eternal place for suffering for the children of God. And then the word for heaven, it's not a place where we are there in the clouds, sitting down and being lazy, doing nothing, playing the harp and eating grapes. This is the teachings of Spiritism, us getting more, the more evolved we get, the more purified we expand our sense of responsibility, and we realize that a journey towards God is infinite, and there is a lot of work to achieve perfection, and that's why it's not possible to achieve that in a single life. We have many existences in this planet, perhaps other planets too, and we are invited to evolve using our free will. And so we develop the sense of wanting to evolve because we can feel the happiness then when we are align our actions with God's will, and we feel happy about that. We feel the clear conscience, and then we want to do more, and we also want to help the ones around us because how could we be eternally happy knowing that those who we love, like our children, our family members, they are maybe in a position of they are weak or they're suffering, and they are creating their own suffering, and how could we be happy there in this place knowing that those whom we love are suffering and we could be helping them? So there are also other laws of the universe, law of solidarity, that we help each other in our progress. So I wanted to spend more time in this beginning. So the last parts are just connection with this one. So our Father which art in heaven, there is an attribute of God which is He's immaterial. God is not subject to change. He's also unchangeable. And those teachings are also in the Spirit's book in the first part. And Allan Kardec developed that more in the book Genesis, the Miracles and Predictions, according to Spiritism. So God is unique. We already said that. God is Supreme Father. He's love. God is immaterial and unchangeable. So God is not subject to the changes that the universe, that the matter is. And how about us connected to God? So we are also unique. Are we material beings? We tend to act as if we are. But Spiritism, and not just Spiritism, but Jesus already taught that. We are spirits, so we are not material. Although different than God, we are still subject to matter. Matter affects us a lot. We feel hunger. We may die of hunger, for example. We feel the pain of our bodies. And we need our planets to evolve. So it's an important difference. But the moment that when we are connecting to God, we recognize that we are immaterial beings, then it starts to help us to make a shift in the way we see the world, the way we see ourselves, And then we realize that this is just an experience that helps me to progress. So we may still feel the pain, but the pain is minimized. So our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. So hallowed means sanctified or maybe purified. And basically on this sentence, when I'm saying hallowed be thy name, what is the verb? Hallowed be. And what is the object? So that's kind of English class. What is the object? Thy name. So God's name, because we're talking to God. So thy name. So thy means your name. Santificado seja o teu nome. And then, but who is doing that? Who is the subject? Who is practicing the action? The person who is praying, so us. So how do we sanctify God's name? There are a lot of interpretations for this. I'm going to bring mine. But first, Allan Kardec. So Allan Kardec said that God's name is written in all the places of the universe. The perfection of his creation is present in the laws of nature, in nature itself. And we cannot doubt that the existence of a supreme being that created everything and everything work in harmony with a purpose. And bring now my personal view is that when I'm connecting to God, when I practice the exercise of adoration, connecting to God, it is better for me because Jesus taught me, my master and role model, that I try to look, to hear, and to feel God as a pure being. And the more I practice that, the more the things in my life make sense. Because if I try to understand God as a supreme being that's much more smarter than me, that knows my past, know the past of each one of us, the past of my relationship with my family members, past lives or this life, knows my future, knows my facts, my limitations, knows that his laws that he created, knows that I'm going to progress to perfection, and then I need experiences that will test me on this pathway to perfection. And that's a very intelligent being, and also a loving father. And also we are brothers and sisters, so it's our Father. So when I'm sanctifying, when I'm transforming my perception of God to be more and more purer, can I say that? It's kind of weird, purer. Then I am connecting to the best that I can in terms of my internal representation of God. And then the same example that I said earlier, then the problems of my life starts to make some sense. Maybe not now, but practicing the exercise, I'll figure out that some situations in my life are trials that come for me to test my learning on specific virtues, because I cannot learn all of them in one existence. So there are some that are more important for each one of us. And then some experiences are more like an expiation, like when we repeated so much the same fail the same test, then we have a kind of like a more intense exercise. And expiation in this strict sense mean that I cannot opt out. So I have to, I'm going to be put in that condition because that's an experience that will help me transform these vices that I have created through repeating the mistakes. And then, but I can change the way I perceive the expiation experience, developing resignation. When I giving the meaning, so resign, reframe the meaning of the experience in my life, and with that representation of God. So our Father which art in heaven, which art or which is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. So let's put together these two sentences: thy kingdom come and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So when I think of kingdom, I think of what? A picture of a king. Those who like medieval shows. So think of a king, think of power, influence, and the kingdom, a place, a land, perhaps, that has a certain limits, and the rules. So the king is the ruler. So in that exercise of connecting to God, so who will be the kingdom of the universe? God. the Almighty, the supreme power of the universe. Now, if the God is the Almighty, the supreme power, todo-poderoso, is there any power left for me? So what is the only power I have?
To him.
The willpower. So God is the supreme will, and I have the power to make choices. It is limited somehow, but it's still my power. So when I say the kingdom come, I interpret as, may I align my will, my free will, with God's will. Because God loves me and He knows what's best for me. So if I can connect to what God wants me to do, to be happier, then I'm aligned. So then His kingdom is coming and I become a collaborator with God. Because God, if God has given us free will, then we are co-creators with God. God is the ultimate creator and we can be co-creators. And so thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So that brings a duality, earth and heaven, which we could interpret as, there could be other interpretations. Not saying that which one is right or wrong. It's mostly like applying some of the interpretations to our lives. So the soul and the body, mind and physical, spiritual world and physical world. And that we can sense that Jesus is reminding us that we are spiritual beings in a material world. So when I talk to God, it's important for me to recognize the many spirits like Joanna and Angelis say that Jesus came to the world, but He was a person of the world. He worked, He lived with His family, He helped His family, and He took care of His body. So when we are practicing the exercise to develop heaven inside of us, to become more spiritualized, to become more congruent with our quintessential attribute, which we are spirits, we may make the mistake of thinking that, oh no, that's my body, I don't care, and don't take care of our body, or ignore the things of the world. But the world is an important school for us. Earth is a school for the souls, and the body is the uniform, is the clothes that I wear during a certain period of time, and that brings me demands, and to fulfill these demands, I develop my intelligence. And to live in a society, I also have opportunity to develop my feelings. And then the prayer goes to, so this first part is more in the praising God, and then comes a part that we ask. And give us this day our daily bread. So we were talking about physical needs. We can see that as a physical need because Jesus chose the word bread, and daily bread because we have needs every day, and every moment we have a need, but also the spiritual needs. And when I'm saying this sentence, I think the invitation is for us to connect to our humbleness, to recognize that our Father is the provider, another attribute of God. So He's the ultimate provider. And you can say mother too, just remember this, I didn't say earlier. Back to Jesus' time, Jesus incarnated as a man, because it was needed back then, it was needed to be a male figure to give us those teachings. But God doesn't have a gender, right? As us spirits, if we can see that in the Spirits book, we also don't have a gender, but we have a genetic identity, and we may reincarnate in the opposite side, depending on the needs for evolution. And that's a topic for not just another lecture, but a seminar, for I think for all of us. There are lots to learn in this area, especially this time, especially with the news that we have nowadays. So we can, if you feel better to call God mother or father, whatever helps you to connect to Him, that's, I think, what should work. And we put the condition of asking for help, and that's really important, because does God wait for us to ask for help to help us? Does He love us conditionally to our saying His name, for us to choose a label that I'm a follower of this sect, of this religion? God doesn't need us to do that. God is the ultimate creator and the Almighty. But we need that. We need to put a position of recognizing that there is somebody who's looking after us, and to ask for help. Because then it's not that the help was not coming before. The help is coming all the time. But when I'm not in the position of recognizing that, I miss the close. Like Katie talked about the signals. So we are missing the signals when we're not put in the position. That's another example why prayer is important to do all the time, to help us to get those goals. And then it goes to the final part, which I consider related to charity, because I think this one important fundamental part of charity is forgiveness. And then we are saying, forgive our trespasses. So if you go back to the metaphor of kingdom, we are not perfect yet. And so that's my warning to wrap it up. So we are not perfect yet. We will be perfect, all of us will be perfect spirits through our choice of a free will, using our free will in a good direction, working on our emotions, transforming our vices into virtues, and we make a mistake. So that's another important part of this exercise when I'm connecting to God, and I recognize that I make mistakes, and I recognize that He loves me no matter what, so He will always forgive. He doesn't need us to ask for forgiveness. He's not offended by us. Otherwise, God would be still an anthropomorphic figure that gets offended like we do. And then the second part, because it's important to mention, is as I forgive those who trespass against me. Because if we are all children of this Father, and if I make mistakes, I have free will. Well, you have free will too. You have to. You have to. And all of us have free will. And if none of us is perfect yet, then we will make mistakes. So then I learn to forgive. That's a really important part for our happiness, is learn to forgive. Even science, I believe, is already researching that and saying things like those who are able to forgive are able to recover or not to develop, recover from cancer or not develop cancer. So that's something for us to watch, not just for our souls, but also for our bodies, our tool for this incarnation. And lead us not into temptation. I think this sentence is kind of tricky. The translation for temptation can also be used for test. In Spiritism, we use the word trials, provas. So it is tricky because we could think that God is leading us into temptation, like He wants to make fun of us or something, but that's not God. So I would say the exercise here is to recognize that we have the trials. The trials is important for us, otherwise they wouldn't exist. And then we can practice identify the trials of our lives and figure out, okay, this happens to me because I still have this vice. So that experiences help me to be tested, to develop the virtue that's missing in the situation. Like, for example, if I'm a violent person, I might be meeting other violent people. And so that's a trial to teach me to be more love, more at peace with myself. And then there are other trials that happen to me. They are, like I mentioned earlier, the expiations, the experience that we cannot opt out. So if I can't avoid that, like the first ones I may be able to avoid when I'm developing the virtues, because I'm creating them now. The other ones that I were creating in the past, I cannot avoid, but I can change the way I perceive them, and I can work to transform that, to minimize my suffering. And then finally, lead us, deliver us from evil, divide us do mal. In a short, I would say that we are brothers and sisters, and there are those discarnated spirits, and there are a lot of studies that we can do to develop understand this more later. This is just a little bit about it. They influence us, and we influence each other. Some of those we harmed, we caused harm in the past. We were in the wicked pathway, we were rebellious children, we were hurting others, and sometimes they're still looking for revenge. And there are other ones who are not our personal enemies. We didn't harm them specifically, but they are enemies of the good. They don't want the good to be spread on our planet because they're jealous, like the Allan, Kardec, and the Spirits developed the idea, I think, in the second part of the Spirits book. So it's very important, connected to the lesson earlier, for us to be watch and pray, for us to be watchful, to be careful, because when we forget about all these exercises in building the kingdom of heaven in our hearts, we might become somehow vulnerable to the influence of those who may be enemies of the good or our enemies. And so the best protection is for us to develop virtues, so we can change the vibration level, and then they cannot interfere much more in our lives. So we get to the end now. I appreciate everybody for the presence.